Is The Great Gatsby a fraud? Now, The Great Gatsby, as you probably know, is one of the most famous novels from the 1920s, and the recent film adaptation featuring Leonardo DiCaprio was a box office hit. However, if we look into the novel specifically, in more detail, we begin to get this sense that Gats is a fraud. Now, of course, in the first place, the novel and the film both make it implicitly clear that Gats is a bit of a shady man and does hold shady company such as Wolfsheim and the other people around him have a bit of a, I guess, air of illegality. But I want to take this more than just an air of illegality. I want to try and prove that he is fundamentally a fraud. Now, where to begin? Well, I suppose the beginning, because that's a pretty damn good place to start. So, Gats is born in North Dakota and is a son of a pig farmer. Now, this seems to somehow disgust Gats, and he basically runs away from home at age 18. Now, obviously, we get to the point at the start of the novel where Gats is presented as this rich, kind of, hedonist almost, with all this opulent housing and, the golden omnibus and what have you. Now, there are many examples of his wealth. However, I believe that his background may have led him to chase this status, wealth, and ultimately, well, he would do this through crime. Now, he wasn't always a criminal. There is examples of him working as a lowly janitor and quitting his job. He also becomes a pearl, wrangler, if you will. One night, anyway, he just runs into this ridiculously wealthy man called Dan Cody, and basically Cody teaches him how to be the Great Gatsby. And it's after Cody dies, and supposedly leaves him into the will, that Gatsby is supposed to have got his wealth. However, this doesn't happen. So Dan Cody's daughter basically writes him out of the will, even though he was written into it by Cody himself. And there's all this legal furore, and basically Gats gets nothing. What he has gained is this sense of, I guess, being a gentleman. See, Cody's taught him how to be like an upper middle class man. And this he will carry with him for the rest of his life and uses as kind of a facade for his new character. He also legally changes his name to James Gatsby, which I guess you could symbolically suggest is also the change from his kind of pig farmer to multi-billionaire Gatsby, or millionaire, Gatsby. Now, Gatsby meets Daisy after this, yada yada, it goes. But then he goes off to fight in the Great War. Now, this ends in 1918, November, 11, 11, 19, sorry, 18 even. Fuck. And he spends 5 months in Oxford. Now, he uses this Oxford University kind of trip for 5 months to then say he's an Oxford man. And it's clear from here that he does use this kind of intellectually as a way of saying that he's got status. Of course, he hasn't actually studied at Oxford University. He's just kind of stayed around the area, but he will still use this. Now, this isn't exactly a lie, but the way Gatsby presents himself is such a way that he presents himself as kind of like old money. And this was a huge status symbol in the 1920s. Obviously, there were lots of people, Wall Street was exploding at this time, and many people were making their wealth off the new market. There were quite a lot of people, however, who had settled and come over with money, and these were called old money, like families, right? And Gats wanted to somehow prove that he was part of that, even though he just most definitely wasn't. Now, why did I mention the fact that he was in Oxford for 5 months? Well, I mentioned this because this would have taken him in to March 1919, and the novel itself starts in 1922. The summer of 1922. This gives him just 3 years to make all this money, to get the Golden Omnibus, to get the Invitation Hotel de Ville. And so just in 3 years, he goes from a nobody that's fighting in the army to one of the richest men in the New York area. Now, due to the fact that Gatsby's families were not rich people, as I mentioned earlier, they were pig farmers, it means that he almost definitely got this money from crime or from the lottery, but he didn't win the lottery. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Wolfsheim is one of the most criminal bastards in the entire US at this time. He's not a real person, but he's just a character, right? Kind of think of him as a more low-key Al Capone kind of thing. This man literally fixed the 1919 World Series. If you don't know what this means, it's basically the biggest game of baseball in the calendar year. And he probably made an absolute killing off that from the bookies. This level of fraud is almost unprecedented. It is also clear that Wolfsheim is involved in some serious bootlegger industry. Um, Now, the bootlegging, for those of you who don't know, was the illegal vending of alcohol during Prohibition, where the US government prohibited the sale of alcohol on a national scale. Now, this resulted in people like Capone getting filthy rich. Now, where are the hints, though, that Gatsby was involved with this? Because Wolfsheim obviously is. Now, we're told he bought up a lot of side drugstores here in Chicago. Here and in Chicago, sorry. Probably money with which he'd initially borrowed from Wolfsheim. And if you're wondering why he borrowed it from Wolfsheim, it's because quite a lot of these people would use mules. Now, mules are basically for when an individual with much power and much wealth is at the top, he doesn't want to get his hands directly dirty. So indirectly, kind of have his lieutenants and what have you, to then distribute and do all the illegal stuff. So he's at top of the board. They're not, but he also has protection money to protect them. They're doing the dodgy business. They rake in the money, but ultimately he gets the most. It's almost like a pyramid scheme, right? Except pretty much everyone at the very top wins. So actually just a pyramid scheme. Now, Gatsby was probably just one of these regular mules, and for some reason Gatsby probably was just taken a liking to by Wolfsheim. It's not particularly clear why, but that's the best I have. Regardless, the significance of the drugstores was the fact that many people knew that the drugstores or pharmacies, we know them in Europe, sold bottles and, alcohol. Now, if you're wondering how they got away with it, it was due to the fact that the police force, for one, were liable to get paid off. This is a very common thing at the time. Corruption in New York at the time was unbelievably rife. And, quite a lot of police would have just turned a blind eye, given enough money or alcohol to do so. Now, this wasn't always the case, but on the whole, people were very aware of bootleggers. However, it didn't directly cause a problem for them, so people in the general public just wouldn't mind it. But yeah, basically within 3 years, Gads manages to make a Hotel de Ville, purchase a golden omnibus, and on a weekly basis holds the most opulent parties in the New York area, all on the back of crime. Now, if you're not convinced he's a fraud still, I don't know what to tell you, right? You don't get that kind of stuff within 3 years without crime, or without a lottery, or without marrying someone filthy rich. Two of those things he didn't do, which only leaves one more thing. And that one possibility is that he is involved with crime. And therefore, he's a fraud. Good night. What's that?